Howdy, Vine Trippers. I wanted to take just a moment before the show begins to tell you a little bit about the Texas Wine Lover website and app. It is a definite must-have for anyone wanting to explore the Texas wine industry. Now, they have a website. It's txwinelover.com, but they also have an app that you can actually download to your phone. You can find it on the Apple App Store or on the Google Play Store for Android devices. And it's going to be kind of your one-stop shop for when you go out to visit these great places. So you get to listen to them here on the podcast or watch them on YouTube to learn about these wineries. But when you go to visit, make sure you're checking out that app, because I'm sure you're probably going to want to visit other places in the area as well. And you can do incredible searches. It's the most comprehensive listing of winery information in Texas. And you can look for wineries in your area to go visit multiple places. You can sort those listings by finding out ones that are kid-friendly, maybe some that are pet-friendly. If you want to look for events or things that are going on, if you want to find those that can host RVs, just about any category you can think of, you can actually sort those listings and find wineries around you to go visit. The app is free to use for you and I. So it's a perfect, again, hand-in-hand tool when you're going out to visit wineries. Listen to them on this podcast, watch them on YouTube, and then start making your plans to go visit and use the Texas Wine Lover app when you go. Now, it can also be a great tool. Maybe you're not even looking for a winery. You just happen to be traveling to some place in Texas, and you just might think, I've got a little extra time. I wonder if there are any wineries in the area. You can actually look them up in the Texas Wine Lover app. You can search either by the name of a winery, or it's got a map view. So you can actually pull up a map of the area around you and see locations of wineries near you and go visit them and support the Texas wine industry. So you got to use the Texas Wine Lover app. It goes perfectly with this podcast. So make sure you check it out before you go on your next trip among the vines. Again, it's www.txwinelover.com, or look up the Texas Wine Lover app on your favorite phone app store and make sure you get that downloaded and use it frequently. You will benefit from it and ask for Texas wines. Let's see the Texas wine industry prosper and go visit some of these fun places that I'm bringing to you on the show. Welcome to Texas Under Vine, an exploratory podcast to scout out the best that Texas wine country has to offer. I'm your wine guide, Scott, and I'm here to lead you on an auditory expedition to the vineyards and wineries across the great Lone Star State. Each episode will cover a different vineyard, winery, or wine-related business operating in Texas. You'll hear interviews, descriptions, and details about each location that will excite you to visit and experience them for yourself. Ready to plan a wine tour? Use these episodes to choose the most interesting spots for you and your friends to check out. Most of all, enjoy hearing about the rapidly growing wine industry in the state and what makes our wines and wineries the best. Howdy, fellow Vine Trippers. Welcome to episode 55 of the Texas Under Vine podcast. And for today's episode, I'm traveling back to the picturesque Texas Hill Country, and I'm on my way to Stonewall, Texas, to visit the lovely Pedernales Cellars. This particular winery isn't on the traditional 290 wine road. At least they're not front facing to it, but they're just a little couple of miles off the road. You'll see a great sign for it there off the highway road 290, but they're back nestled off of the hustle and bustle of the loud traffic and everything, the noise that you get on highway 290, back into the really peaceful, serene area of the country. Again, just a couple of miles off the actual wine road 290. So you get a lot of quiet and a lot of peacefulness there at this beautiful winery location. Now, when it comes to Pedernales Cellars, it was actually started as a vineyard project by the Kuhlkens back in the 1990s. The current owner and CEO, Dr. Julie Kuhlken, her parents started this. They retired early from IBM and planted a vineyard, which is actually in a different place. It's actually north of Fredericksburg off Highway 16. And they started this vineyard project there and worked that vineyard for several years, trying different varieties and different things, but the heart of Pedernales Cellars is really the Kuhlken Vineyards there off Highway 16 north of Fredericksburg. But around 2005 or so, children, Dr. Julie Kuhlken and David Kuhlken, decided to leave their current careers to form a winery that they call Pedernales Cellars, that actually gets a lot of its fruit from that Kuhlken vineyard and making wine from that as well as from other locations as well. One of their first important plantings there at that Kuhlken vineyard is Tempranillo, which is a varietal that they're very famous for there at Pedernales Cellars. And Dr. Kuhlken actually started her career as a philosophy professor, thus the doctor in her name. And she spent a lot of time in that career before switching directions and giving a lot of her time and attention now to Pedernales Cellars. Again, they started doing that around 2005. That was their first vintage. And they plotted out their place of land for the winery outside of that north of Fredericksburg area, more towards the Wine Road area, where they are now in Stonewall, Texas. Again, just a couple of miles off the Wine Road 290. They are a 100% Texas winery using all Texas grapes, including those from that Kuhlken vineyard, which they replanted to about 13 acres, and including different varietals like Alicante Boucher, Petit Sirah, Graciano, Tiraldigo, and Sangiovese. And they're really excited that this spring, they're actually going to release their first wine made from 100% organic grapes it's a blend of Mourvèdre and Grenache. So be looking for that wine coming out really soon. And another fun fact is they actually have a fun and really tasty rosé called Over the Moon Rosé, and it gets its name from Dr. Kuhlken and David's parents, who, when they were at IBM, actually worked on the moon mission, the Apollo 11 mission together. And so they created this rosé as a tribute to that foundation in their relationship. Their best known wines are actually Tempranillo and Viognier, and they have both of those actually out in distribution at your local HEBs and other places. But if you come to the winery, you're going to get their reserve version of both of those varietals, which they kind of follow some of, especially for Tempranillo, the more Spanish regulations. So if you're familiar with those, what you get at someplace like HEB might be considered more of a Crianza style, which usually means about 2 years, combination of barrel and bottle aging. But their reserve style is more of a reserva in the Spanish nomenclature. And that means that it has 3 years of aging in both bottle and in barrel as well. So you get a little bit more age and a little bit more richness to those reserva versions that you would get there at the winery itself. But like I said, you can get those other versions there at HEB. So if you haven't had a chance to get to Pedernales Cellars yet and you are anxious to try their wines, go to your local HEB or other types of locations. I know HEB carries them, and you'll be able to find those wines so you can taste them before you go. And Dr. Kuhlken will talk a little bit more about that in the interview as well. And if you are an electric vehicle owner, you're going to be excited to know that they've actually installed EV charging stations right in their parking lot right there. So you can take care of all of your electrical vehicle charging needs while you go inside to do your tasting and enjoying the scenery and the beautiful nature around this great winery. So when I went to visit, I was invited to go down into the wine cellar, surrounded by all the barrels of that amazing wine that we had there. And I got to talk to Dr. Julie Kuhlken, who is, again, the CEO and owner of Pedernales Cellars. And I was really excited to be able to interview her because she and I have actually judged a few wine competitions together. So we were familiar with one another and had talked a little bit here and there. But I wanted to sit down and really hear her story story about this amazing winery, the vineyard behind it, the Kuhlken Vineyard, and hear that story and the influence. This is a really important winery. It's been here for about 20 years in the Texas Hill Country, and so I wanted to hear that story directly from her. So without further ado, let's go to that interview so you can hear it as well.
Howdy, Vine Trippers. I'm here at Pedernales Cellars and really excited. I'm here with Dr. Julie Kuhlken, and she's the CEO and owner of Pedernales Cellars here. And we're here coming from the actual cellar. You can see the great barrels behind us. And so we're going to learn a little bit about this amazing location and get you excited to come out here for your visit when you come to see it. So, Dr. Kuhlken, tell me a little bit about yourself. What got you into the wine industry?
Well, I always say I blame my parents.
Okay.
My parents, or our parents, I should say, my brother and I, they got early retirement. They were in corporate America with IBM, but back in the 90s, if people remember the 90s, there was actually early retirement from IBM. And so they had a chance to have a longer retirement, and they decided to plant a vineyard. At the time, I thought they were crazy because, I'm used to my parents being, corporate America. And suddenly they're like, no, we're going to go live in the countryside and grow grapes. So
Hey, we were IT, now we're farmers. What's this all about?
I think they'll work of it. So they did have a connection to being on farms. And they chose grapes, which was a very lucky choice. Was at the time, the other thing that was going on in Texas is, again, if you remember this, was the emus.
Oh, yeah. Everyone was raising emus.
Yes. And luckily, they didn't choose that because that turned out to be a pyramid scheme. And I was living in the Bay Area. So my father came out and he visited UC Davis and he was getting information about soil types and things like that. And they did choose a very good location. We are actually located in Bell Mountain AVA, which is the oldest AVA in Texas. Anyway, so they planted, though, what you would plant in the mid-90s, which was Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, Chardonnay, and Sauvignon Blanc. The whites immediately did poorly. It was very obvious they were not in the right place. The reds did okay, particularly the Merlot. The Merlot was actually, in the long run, we ultimately, after 20 years, we did finally pull out the Merlot. But for 20 years, it was actually a good project. The problem with the Cab is that, we have a short growing season in Texas, and Cabernet Sauvignon wants a long growing season to work out all the pyrazines. So, but they had no intention of making wine. I mean, they made wine once, and it was really awful. They made it with a baseball bat and everything, just, home wine. But anyway, they sold the grapes to the wineries that existed at the time, of which there were about 3.
Okay.
So, anyway, but it was an excellent experience. Obviously, David and I, my brother and I, helped plant the vineyard. We would come occasionally and help harvest. Obviously, we were part of the baseball bat experience of making wine.
Did each of you have your own bat with your name?
It was just like, well, what are we going to crush the grapes with? Well, we got this baseball bat. Let's clean it up. So anyway, but it was only after a decade that my brother and I, we both had started our families and we had worked for, a decade or so. And we decided, maybe we'll start the winery. And anyway, so we expanded the vineyard at that point. And we didn't plant any more Cabernet Sauvignon. We planted Tempranillo. Because at that point, we knew, if you will, the track record with the grapes that my parents had started with. And we, as I said, we didn't pull them out immediately. We continued to work with them. But the reality is that that's when we took a bet on Tempranillo. And the rest of what we planted were Rhone varieties, Grenache and Mourvèdre.
Okay.
And Portuguese varieties. So we have actually quite a good-sized block of Touriga Nacional in the vineyard. Because originally we were going to use that for port, but after about 6 or 7 years, we're like, no, that's way too good to pour brandy over. And so we have a number of wines that include that Touriga, because it doesn't take much Touriga,
right,
to significantly influence a wine.
Okay.
So, and it is a good blending partner. So anyway, so that's how, we got involved. It was really, if our parents had not planted the vineyard, we would never have considered starting a winery. That was not, that wasn't our background. My background is I used to be a philosophy professor. Okay. And my brother was an IT guy. So
yeah.
Yeah.
So he was following the family footsteps. You went off in to become a doctor and to teach philosophy.
Yeah, totally different. Yeah.
How long did you do that before you started this project?
Basically 10 years, because obviously it takes, for a decade. It takes a while to get a PhD, and so that so delayed my entry into the full-time workforce. Obviously, you teach while you get a PhD, but Anyway, but yeah, for about a decade. And I love teaching, right? The relationship with students is unique. And sometimes I'm like, oh, I miss that. But, you do get a lot of, if you will, teaching moments in the wine industry, talking about grapes that people haven't heard about, wine techniques they haven't heard about. So it works out.
You're constantly learning, you're constantly seeking new knowledge and all of that. And now the grapes are your teachers and you are the student, right?
Exactly. Yeah, no, I mean, one of the things that we learned over the years was we did try other white varieties, right?
Okay.
But we've finally just decided that's just a red site. The last thing we had was Albarino. And it did okay. But again, the red grapes do so much better. It was just, why are we doing this?
Yeah, you let the grapes, again, teach you and show you what's best here.
Yeah.
And over time and testing. So how long ago did that whole process start? When was Pedernales Cellars started?
Our first vintage was 2006. So basically a decade after the planting of Kuhlken Vineyards, which was 1995. And what we made was a family reserve. We just took everything that was in Kuhlken Vineyards, or most of what was in Kuhlken Vineyards, and we blended it into the family reserve. And so that's our first wine. And we happen to have an event today where we're actually going through some older vintages of the family reserve. So
it's cool.
Perfect day for it.
Yeah.
And I was just explaining to staff that, this was our first wine, not this particular vintage, but yeah, that 2006 family reserve. And that's why it got named that, because it's sort of a nod to our parents.
Yeah.
And so, anyway, but yeah.
Well, how was this location and this site chosen?
We chose the vineyard is not located on this site.
Right.
Yeah. Because as I say, the vineyards is a perfect place to grow grapes, but my parents still lived on the property, and it would not have been a good place to have a tasting room. I mean, production facility would have been fine there, but the tasting room wouldn't. And it is interesting that we made that decision back in 2006. And to this day, there isn't a single tasting room on 16 North.
Yeah.
It's a very winding, climbing road. And it's my mother had 3 accidents going back and forth between Fredericksburg and that ranch house before they moved into town. Because it's just, one time someone just drove out to the end of the driveway and just pulled out right in front of her. Yeah. So anyway, so we did want to have the tasting room there. So we chose this location, obviously, even in 2006. And we're like the 8th or 9th G permit, which is the producing permit in Gillespie County. So there weren't a lot of wineries at that time, but it was still already obvious, like probably you want to be near 290.
Sure.
Life is going to be easier along 290. But we did not purchase a property that was right on it. We actually chose to be slightly off of it because then we have the view that really, 40% of the reviews we get mention the view. So, because it's a gorgeous view, particularly if, on a slightly warmer day than today, to sit out on the deck and just, sip on wine. It's just very, very pleasant. So we chose it really with a view in mind, but it's a mile and a half south of 290. So it was a combination of factors. The building that you will if you come to the tasting room, was a 5,000 square foot second home.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, no, it was a huge place. It was partially because it got built over time. There was an original 1880s farmhouse that then got expanded in the 1970s, and then in the 1980s, they doubled the house. They added a second kitchen, second living room, second, everything. And they were basically more nearly living in the modern part of the house, or when they visited. So, and then we've expanded it again. So it's, but to make it into a open space for a tasting room with a big U bar and the whole thing. And during the pandemic, we actually remodeled inside because we were closed. What better time to remodel? What else do we have to do? Yeah. So we added a lot more seating at that point and took out a lot of merchandise that used to fill the tasting room. So anybody who hasn't been here for 5 years, they gotta come back. Yeah, you gotta come back because it is very different. It's nice, but there is more seating inside, and so people on a day during the winter, if it rains, you can just sit inside and still enjoy the view.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Well, I love that the proximity to 290, but the fact that you're kind of off of 290, so it feels like you're kind of going back into this little country drive. When you first turn off right there to where the Pedernales Cellars sign is, and you bring that little windy road right up to the taster. It's so beautiful, and you feel like you're in the country with all the trees and everything. So it's kind of secluded, but still close enough right there to the wine road that it's easy for tourism to get in and out, but you don't have the sound of the traffic going up and down, and it's really kind of this beautiful, peaceful area out here.
No, it's very nice.
Yeah. Well, tell me about the name, Pedernales Cellars.
So Pedernales Cellars is named, I mean, when that view is a view of the Pedernales River Valley. So it is named after the river, which winds through this area. It also means flint or flint stone. So the reason we have the arrowheads in our logo is because while we were expanding Kuhlken Vineyards and when we were building the production facility that we're sitting in, because this was obviously not here.
Yeah.
We found arrowheads, and that it just sort of serendipitous, and so we decided to use the arrowheads, but then also it's implied in the name and everything, so it all ties together. And it's very much a nod to the hill country. Kuhlken Vineyards is in the hill country, and though most grapes in Texas are grown in the high plains, the fact is it is a unique place to grow grapes, and so all of that sort of integrated. Of course, people say Pedernales, that is a LBJ thing. And Lyndon Baines Johnson had an enormous influence on this area. And in fact, most of the United States discovered the hill country because of LBJ. Yeah, because there were lots, you can hear this from, old families in Fredericksburg that, what happened was they had all these journalists who were coming and visiting the Texas White House, and they were, had to stay somewhere. So they stay in Fredericksburg, and they're like, well, this is really charming. Yeah. I didn't know anything about this.
German influence and all this that we have.
Well, and it would have been in the 1960s when this was occurring. This really would have been the old families and not many other people. Now, of course, Fredericksburg is extremely well known. A lot of people have retirement homes in Fredericksburg, and so it's a completely different place. Though, interestingly enough, I mean, I live in Fredericksburg. There is a completely different Fredericksburg that belongs to the locals, and it's just like, you never go down Main Street. You immediately turn at Elk and go down either San Antonio or Austin or even Travis. It just, you have your own way of moving around the town.
Turn by the old oak tree, and you get to the cemetery.
Yeah. So anyway, so yeah, as I said, Pedernales was how LBJ said it, and so a lot of people say it. I remember this was kind of a decade ago. One time I had, had an article and they interviewed me, and the article was all great. And then the editor took it and put Pedernales across the top, having not obviously looked very carefully at the article. Right. So.
Has anybody ever approached you and said, you misspelled the name on your label?
Exactly. Well, we get it a lot. I mean, you get a lot of things where it's misspelled. Yeah. And, and people will even come in and say, well, how do you say it? And we say Pedernales, right? We're not going to correct you if you say Pedernales.
It's that Texas twang. You may have slipped some words in here or there, letters.
Exactly.
Pedernales with Pedernales.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Well, let's talk about your fruit here. So you talked about the vineyard, Kuhlken Vineyard. Is that the sole place you get fruit, or do you get some from the high plains, or 100% Texas? I'm assuming.
Yeah, we're 100%
Where's your
Texas.
fruit come from?
Well, I mean, recently we replanted at the same time we were doing this remodel. We actually replanted Kuhlken Vineyards. It would appear that in 2007, when we brought in those new vines, they had viruses in the nursery itself, and some of them, like the leaf roll, is actually an acknowledged problem. There's even a federal program that. You if you wanted to spend several years applying to get some money back, you could, but bureaucracy makes the money almost unattainable. So, but anyway, so we ended up replanting. The advantage of that is you really get to reconsider like what it is that you have in the vineyard. And, over time you develop programs of wines. And one of ours is the KO. It's an allocation club. It's one wine a year. Released either 6 or 12 bottles. Most of them are 6 bottle. And really we replanted for that wine.
Okay.
Because, when you grow your own grapes, you have absolute control over what you're doing and the choices you make. Whereas, when you're contracting grapes, you're giving instructions, but the fact is it's a dialogue. So anyway, what we ended up planting that we didn't have before was Alicante Boucher.
Okay.
Petit Sirah.
Uh-huh.
Which is a bruiser. That thing grows so quickly. It's
really.
Oh yeah. I mean, you compare it to the grapes next, like the Tempranillo next door. You're like, my God. Yeah, it grows extremely quickly. Puts together the permanent wood very quickly. Terrell
Okay.
which is a sort of upcoming grape right now in Texas, and Sangiovese.
Okay.
Yeah. So, oh, and Graciano.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, this is one of the things. I mean, we specialize in Tempranillo. We make a lot of Tempranillo, and the Tempranillo loves Texas. It loves the heat. It loves it. You have to irrigate it because it can't deal with drought very well. But it makes these beautiful large clusters. If you will, and it likes a short growing season. Tempranillo means a little early one. But the one thing that is a problem everywhere with Tempranillo, but particularly it really shows up in Texas, is it's acid challenged.
Okay.
It's hard to get the acidity drops off really quickly toward the end of the growing season.
Right as the flavors are developing.
Yes. So what we do now, which was earlier, we would just acidify, but now what we do is we blend with Graciano.
Okay.
Which is what they do in Rioja
That's
as well.
very common in Spain.
Yeah.
So
So because Graciano is exactly the opposite. It retains its acidity and its tannins. It develops really strong tannins. It isn't as fruity, though. So it's nice to blend it rather than have it 100% Graciano. So anyway, so that's one of the things we added because we now regularly blend Graciano into our Tempranillos. So anyway. But anyway, the rest of the fruit does come from the high plains. And, you know, why would
supplement a little bit.
Well, no, it's so good. I mean, you know, they say that generally the cited statistic is 80% of the grapes in Texas are growing. We basically get about 75% of our grapes from the high plains. And part of it is the whites. We do not grow whites, as I've said several times. We tried and decided against it. Or we specialize in Viognier. And Viognier in particular is not well suited to the hill country because it's also acid challenged.
Yes.
And so it needs what the high plains have, which is the greater diurnal, that it's cooler at night than it is during the day. It's like a 30-degree difference, whereas in the hill country it's more like 20.
Yeah.
So anyway, so yeah, all of our whites come from the high plains, and that includes also Roussanne. And we used to do Albarino. We sort of moved it out of the yeah, a little bit of Marsanne, Vermentino when we can get it.
Oh, so that's hard to get.
Yeah.
These days.
Anyway, we just released today, literally today, a pet nap out of Simeon.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So, and we've gotten Chenin Blanc in the past. To some extent, you know, we're married to Viognier, and it's turned out that Roussanne seems to be the white that delivers in Texas because in vintages where you get almost nothing else, you could still get Roussanne.
Yeah.
And so we do rely on that, usually as a blend, not 100%.
I was going to say, are you blending like Marsanne in there, things like that?
Oh, Viognier.
Viognier too as well. Okay, it was Southern Rhone.
Yeah. And so then we also have, I mean, in terms of the other wines that we make, to sort of regular program, right? And then outside the Tempranillos, we make a GSM, logically. We do a varial Mourvèdre, most vintages. We do have one Bordeaux blend.
Yeah.
And it's not always 100% Bordeaux varieties, but it is fundamentally. And that generally speaking is sourced from Newsom vineyards because we find they can ripen the Bordeaux varieties better than.
He's so well known for Cabernet.
Yeah.
Sure.
So, and then we have an Italian blend, which for reasons I'm not going to explain, it's called Valhalla, which is a weird name for an Italian blend. But anyway, there's a story there. Anyway, so that is all coming from the high plains. Yeah. Those, not the GSM. The GSM we grow part of, but yeah, those wines are all coming from high plains.
We can't tease me with a good story. So why is it called Valhalla if it's an Italian blend?
What happened was the 2013 vintage, which is infamous in Texas because it was the year there were 4 late spring freezes in the high plains. One right after the primaries came out, one right after the secondaries came out, and one after the tertiaries. And then another one, just the good measure. As my brother said after you talked to either the Binghams or the Newsoms, and he's thinking, I think we're just watching the Rebel Bounce at this point. So anyway, we had contracted 100 tons and we got 4.
Wow.
Yeah.
4%.
4% of what we had contracted. So anyway, the thing is that immediately impacted the whites, obviously, because we just didn't have any in the 2013 vintage. Anyway, but for the reds, there was sort of a pause before we suddenly was like, oh crap, we don't have wine. And it turned out Dave reached out, so says, anybody have any more 2012? Because 2012 was a pretty good vintage.
Yeah.
So, and it turned out that Dave Riley at Dukeman did, and he had a blend of Aglianico and Montepulciano, which not surprising for them.
Right.
And so we bought it, and then we blended it with Tempranillo. And then, we had a new wine and we didn't have any ideas. And so we came up with Valhalla because of the Swedish heritage on one side and the fact that the bar at Rice University, where my brother went, was called Valhalla. So we named, but we didn't think we were going to make the wine again, right? Anyway, the wine turned out to be immensely popular.
Really?
Yes. And because obviously Italian varieties bring completely different flavor profiles than anything we had done before. And so that was the 2012 vintage, released, I guess, in 2014 probably. And then in the 2016 vintage, we made it again. But by that time, the name had stuck. And so we just continued to sell our Italian blend Valhalla.
I love that. I like those unique names you have between you, but like that. So,
well, and just 2 vintages ago, I guess 22, we had a white blend, and we decided to call it Arcadia. So we have a white that's a home of the gods, and a red that's a home of the gods, just different places.
So, one of the things that I love, and this is my own personal thing, is I love when wineries name their wine something unique, even if it's a single varietal. Just like, in the old world, you're not going to go over and say, this is a Merlot. They call it by the chateau or by, different things typically. And so I like that when there's a maybe even if it's just for a single varietal, because there's story behind it and there's something that makes it unique to that location. So
yeah, well, actually, along those lines, we have the Diva.
okay,
Diva it was funny. I was actually at a wine club event, and this person said, "Oh, I used to love your Muscat, but I like this Diva too." And I said, "It's the same wine." So we actually have.
What do they like?
Yes, we actually had a moment where we were coming out with a new vintage of the Muscat, and we still had one. I was like, no, we can't try to sell 2 Muscats. So I said, no, we're just going to rename it, and we named it after the vineyard cat, which she has fortunately passed away since, but she was this cat that you sort of looked at her and she go meow. You got closer to her, meow, 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 meow. She would just
Accelerated.
Yeah, it's like crazy. I mean, the whole time you're petting her, meow, 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 meow. So she was originally called Willow, and I was like, no, that's not a willow. So we renamed her Diva, and then we named the wine after.
So that will forever live on.
Diva will live on.
That's great. I love that. Well, you got the Kuhlken Vineyard. How many acres did you have there?
Well, it was, before the replanting, it was 18. It's now about 13 because we reduced the spacing on the
rows and all.
The rows, yeah.
So that's going to place 30 years, and now with the replanting, about 20 years or so. What have you experienced over time as opposed to things like climate change? Have you noticed any big differences or pressures of Pearson's disease that are starting to come in a little bit? What are some of the challenges you face with that?
Well, the Pearson's disease, when my parents planted in the mid-90s, the view was that Pearson's disease stopped, for I-35. Anyway, they did get Pearson's disease in those whites. They were already compromised. So yes, we've been managing Pearson's disease the whole time, basically. And that was why we pulled out the first set of whites, the Sauvignon Blanc and Chardonnay. And that way we're like, no, just pull that out. It wasn't happening anyway. And yeah, we never replanted. At that point, that was the first time we planted Mourvèdre. As actually when we pulled those out, we said, well, let's just plant some things and see what works. And Mourvèdre was one of them. And some Sangiovese, which ultimately we now have planted more of. So yeah, no, that's always been a challenge. I don't know about, the thing about climate change is, it's very often, it's really climate weirding, but we've been doing that all along in Texas. That I remember my, unfortunately, ex-husband at some point, he had visited my parents for it's the second or third time. And, my mom made the comment yeah, it's a really weird year this year. And he turned to me later, he's like, she says that every year.
Every year's like their year.
And that is the thing about climate change. In some ways, Texas wine growers are in better shape than many other places are used to very stable weather because we always have weird weather. We're always having to sort of, turn on a dime like, oh, well, we're going to do that, but we're not. We're going to do something else because that's what happens every year. Because you have, you don't know whether you're going to have a spring freeze. You don't know whether you're going to have the hail. You don't know whether you're going to have one of these periods in the middle of summer where suddenly it just all stalls out, right? Everything stops growing because it's too hot, right? Plants are just shutting down and waiting it out, basically. So yeah, that is, the issue, the industry in this area that's probably going to cease to exist is the peaches.
Oh.
Because they're not getting their freeze hours. Like this year, it hasn't frozen yet. in this area. I mean, it's gone down to 39.
Yeah.
But this is, I mean, you have to be under 40 for like a lot of hours for the peaches to grow. So I actually think the peaches may disappear, which is really sad because it's so emblematic. In fact, they have Peach Queen in Stonewall where we're located, but they may continue to have the Peach Queen, but I don't think they're gonna have peaches. So yeah, that was one of the questions that came up because I didn't know that about peaches until I was, in the industry. And someone said, well, with grapes, do you need freeze hours? I was like, no.
What's a freeze hour?
Yeah, that's not a thing. I mean, you do want enough cold weather. Those are dormant. Yeah, because there are parts of the world where they're trying, like Madeira, it's tropical enough that it's very difficult to get the vines go dormant. My brother visited a winery in Thailand.
Really?
Yes, and they couldn't, obviously it did not go dormant, and so they would get two crops a year, but the vines would only last 10, 12 years.
Yeah.
And then they were just,
I'm sure, but the quality of each of those crops is not as good either because of
because you're not have the dormancy. So, but yeah, no, the challenges. But as I say, I mean, Texans are really pretty. We are actually in a better shape than many other regions that are not used to this.
Yeah. That's an interesting thought. I haven't really thought through that. With the volatility that we have of the weather here, we have to be adaptable already, and so we may not notice the climate change maybe as much as a climate that's pretty stable all the time, and they start seeing those shifts a little bit here and there as they go. Whereas for us, it's so bad. I never thought about that in those terms. That's an interesting idea.
Well, you also become very aware of those varieties that deliver.
Yeah.
Year after year. That's why I say on the white side, it is Roussanne. I mean, it's just some of the worst years, like 2020, still have Roussanne.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Tempranillo, same thing. Tempranillo also has the advantage that basically, I mean, excluding the Gulf Coast, right? It basically grows in all the major growing areas very well, which means that, okay, well, it hail here, but it's not going to hail everywhere. At least we haven't done that yet in Texas. So, and so that becomes very important, is to see those varieties that, just are survivors. Mourvèdre is another one.
Yeah.
It's a survivor. Grenache does really pretty well. Not surprising. It's it's drought resistant and all these things. But unfortunately, it's the color of fruit punch most years. So it's, you have to blend it with
Definitely
something.
blending for some color. And that's the Alicante Boucher.
Alicante Boucher.
Petit Sirah, things like that. They're more ED colors.
No, Petit Sirah, that was one of the new ones too. I mean, as I said, watching it grow and you're like, oh, okay, I see why that's the powerhouse of southern France. I visited southern France and a winery in the Languedoc. And she was describing, I can't remember the number, but the number is so big, you just couldn't believe that, that's the area that, supplied things like the French army, right, with its wine. And it was like 1 billion bottles a year or something absurd. But then you look at Petit Sirah and you're like, okay, if you're going to do that much, you're going to need something like
hardy,
Petit Sirah.
vigorous.
Yeah. So, and delicious. So,
already. Excellent.
Bonus.
Well, do you do any of the winemaking here? Pretty of a winemaker. Does David do some of that?
David was the original winemaker. He did the UC Davis certificate program. And I say he basically was the winemaker through the 2014 vintage and some influence in the 15. And with the 15, we had Demi, and she did the TTU certificate program, through Texas Tech. And, she came in as sort of an assistant winemaker, finished the certificate, and then she became the winemaker. And her specialty was blending. She was really, really precise about the blending, whereas David always had been very focused on structure. Okay. And you can really see this in a program, like I said, the KO, because these are supposed to be long aging wines. What's interesting is Dave's 13 and 14 are still drinking very well, whereas her 15 and 16 did not last as long because it was really perfect when it was first made, but
good to be drunk young, not.
So, which is sort of an interesting discovery. Anyway, and then when Demi left, she went to work with her family. She was, again, we sort of same situation. We had someone who's assistant winemaker who's doing the TTU's certificate program, Joanna.
Okay.
And she had started in the vineyard. She was like the assistant vineyard manager. We were so surprised when she wanted to do that. But she had gotten the bug from doing demos at like HEB, right, as a part-time thing. Anyway, so yeah, she was the winemaker for many, many years. She stepped down last year. She's interesting enough, it goes back to the theme. I mean, she's a very organized person and likes, to plan. And it just became stressful trying to deal with these, like, all of a sudden you didn't have this, or, and so she finally decided it just wasn't the right job for her. And so we'd already brought him in. We have now Tace, and he's South African.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, so he's
Wine culture there.
yes, and so he, yeah, in fact, he was nominated for the best young winemaker in South Africa. So yeah, anyway, so he's been with us for 2 vintages, and it's said he will be here for next one. So we have to do the H2A process, right? So we don't know after that whether he's going to stay on, but he's a really good winemaker.
Yeah.
And he's really good about, like, when he's doing his blending, he'll actually bring them down to where obviously all the production people work in the production building, whereas all the hospitality people work in the building where the tasting room is. But he'll also bring wines down and sort of have us taste them and say, which of these
What are your thoughts?
Yeah, what are your thoughts? One of the exciting things that we will be releasing in the spring probably is our first wine made with organic grapes.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and he's blending that. It's going to be a rosé. Obviously, 2024 is the first vintage that they're organic. So anyway, he was bringing that down. It's a Grenache Mourvèdre based blend. He was bringing it down, and the Grenache is lovely. The Mourvèdre, needed some work, so it ended up being a smaller part of the blend than we would have. He would have loved to done more volume, but it didn't work with the flavor profile. So, but anyway, Tace is our winemaker. Dave obviously, gives inputs. Yeah, I mean, but the fact is, fundamentally, it's an independent winemaker.
In his hand.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned rosé. Rosé is not necessarily one of my favorites, but one of my favorite ever rosés is your Over the Moon rosé. And I would love to share that story. I've heard it myself, but I'd love for you to share that story with my listeners about that.
Yeah, no, the Over the Moon, what happened was our original rosé, right, was we made rosé, I think, since the 2007 vintage. It is a category that works well in Texas because we have a lot of red grapes because of the warm weather, but we have 6 months of summer as well. So having a heavy wine in the middle of August when it's 102 isn't necessarily appealing. So rosé ends up being a good category. And obviously, rosés, if you will, home is Provence, again, warm climate, which actually very much resembles the hill country. When I visited, it was like, it smelled like the hill country.
Really?
Yeah, it was really sort of bizarre. I actually felt like I was at home. Our original rosé, that we made since 2007, was the Texas dry rosé. And the reason for that was at that time, if you had a rosé in the lineup, the person would very often say, oh, no, I don't drink sweet wines, right? And you're like, no, it's a dry rosé. It's on the bottle. So
Everybody thought it was white marriage or something like that, white Zin.
White Zinfandel. So anyway, so we had that for many times. And then I don't remember which year that was, like 16, 17. Rosé was so in. And so our distributor wanted to have the rosé. And so, okay, well, if it's going to be in distribution, we're going to have to do a different rosé in the tasting room. And that's when the Over the Moon rosé. This is one of the few wines that I've actually named that I think the name is successful. It's usually my brother's better at this than me. Anyway, the reason for Over the Moon rosé is that our parents met working on the Apollo 11 mission. They literally met over a mainframe. They were working for IBM and they were contracted to NASA to do the computer programming. And yeah, and the other sort of serendipitous thing was, it must have been 2018. It was a 2018 vintage because we bottled it, and like a week later was Valentine's Day. And I took it, I have dinner with my parents every week on Wednesdays, and I took it with me to give to them because that was the 50th anniversary of the Apollo 11 mission, or the Ice Lodge. And so I gave it to them and said, we made this wine. And it says on the back, it commemorates, their relationship and the fact that they were the founders of Kuhlken Vineyards. So
Whoa, I love that story. That's great. And it's an amazing rosé. So good. In fact, I talked to my wife before I came here. We're going to take a bottle back to her. She loves this so much as well. And all of you, we kind of skipped this for a little bit, but all the wines you're processed here on site?
Well, in practice, yes.
Okay.
But the fact is, just to talk about the logistics of winemaking,
Whites,
the whites are pressed off in the high plains and brought back down as juice.
On the spec.
Yeah. And then fermented here. So yes, to the extent that it just you're not bringing white clusters of grapes down here. You're bringing juice. So
But you bring your reds here and all
Yeah.
that crush and all that.
No, the crush pad is, I mean, it's not above us, because that's more, it's over there. Yeah. So, but no, yeah, when this building was built, we actually built it in stages. This was the first. At one point, everything was down here, and we actually did crush out there. Anyway, eventually got too crowded, but it was a crazy space at that point because you had tanks and you had everything. Yeah, but the joke was that because this is literally an underground cellar, is that, you know, when the zombie apocalypse comes, we're coming here, just bring some cheese and crackers.
True, you got plenty of wines to last through. Love it. So what are some of your most popular wines with customers? What are the ones that people just say, as soon as you put it on the shelf, it's going to be gone, and people are really clamoring for it?
Well, our flagship wines are the Viognier Reserve and the Tempranillo Reserve. Okay. And the wines, the two main wines we have in distribution are, you know, a Viognier and a Tempranillo. They're not the same wines at all, because the Viognier, in the case of the Viognier Reserve, is actually, it has some oak aging in it, which is not true of the one that's in distribution. The Tempranillo, you know, the Reserve, I mean, the term Reserve doesn't mean anything, right? It can be used any way you want to. Yeah. We do actually treat it according to the Reserva system, meaning it does have the full 3 years between barrel and bottle before we'll release it. And it does make a huge difference, that bottle time. With Tempranillo, it makes a huge difference. And so, whereas the one in distribution, sort of Crianza, so it's like 2 years, the Reserve is 3 years. So those are, I would say, easily our flagships, and they're by intent. The GSM is extremely popular. And obviously so is the Valhalla. But yeah, I mean, there's certain wines we always make, right? Well, we don't always make, because we sometimes can't get the grapes. Like, we've had years we cannot make a Viognier, right? That does happen. But we always make a Tempranillo. And then we have other wines we make by, if you will, like, oh, wow, the grapes are really good this year, let's do that. And like the Malbec. But every third or fourth year, Malbec's really good in Texas. The other 2 or 3 years, not at all. So we just don't make it. Maybe some Malbec, it ends up in the Bordeaux blend, the Nouveau. But yeah, no, I would definitely, you know, anybody who comes here, you know, I try to always have both, though sometimes I only have one between the Viognier Reserve and the Temp Reserve, because that's, if you will, the core of what we do. So
your core red and white right there.
Yeah.
So you've been doing this 20 years, at least with the tasting room almost now. So are there any varietals that you've always wanted to kind of, I really would love to play around with that. I wish we could do this, but maybe you just haven't had a chance, or does it grow well here, or things like that?
No, Pinot Noir. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, obviously it's varieties that are just excluded in Texas, you know, and, you know, Pinot is one of them. I know there's a few good Sauvignon Blancs, but it's not, you know, it's just not, it's harder. Yeah. And I mean, I think it would be fun to do a Chardonnay, but Chardonnay is all about winemaking, really, because it's a neutral grape. But, you know, we have so many to play with. One of the ones I'd like, you know, if I, you know, we can't, we're not growing whites, but I would love to see a Sortico and
Greek wine.
Yeah, Greek wines, because I haven't seen anybody play with that. And yet the Zinamavro, also lovely. So, yeah, so those are ones I would love to see made in Texas, because I think they would do very well. So.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about your location here for just a moment. So, we got a big event. You got a wine club release party today. What types of events do y'all do here on site?
Well, obviously, you know, the core events are for our wine club members. So then we do a Valentine's Day pairing. We do what we call a tasting room takeover, and it means it's something we developed during the pandemic, just to because you had to do seated tastings, right? And so we're like, okay, well, let's just take over with some style of wine. Like, we'll do only signature series wines, for instance, you know, and those are single varietal, single vineyard wines. It's a complete separate. Most of what we make is blended. There are, you know, 100% Viogniers for instance, but like those are Tempranillos are not 100% Tempranillo. So the signature series was, you know, for a way to do the single varietal, single vineyard. Anyway, so we'll take over the tasting room and we'll have food pairings, and so we do that several times a year, and we sort of do it to some extent sort of based on what we have in our library, because we just set aside wine, you know, to return to later. So we're doing a takeover style for Valentine's Day. We do try to do one event a year in the Kuhlken Vineyards.
Okay.
We used to do afternoon events, but the nicest time to be in the vineyard is July, which is not a nice time to be there in the afternoon. So the last 2 years we've done this at breakfast,
Oh, okay.
which actually works out very well. So we do a tour of the vineyard, and then, we have breakfast and talk about, share some other wines. And so, and until this last year, my father would come out. And anyway, he doesn't have the mobility now to actually walk around the terrain that's that even. So, but it's all on a slope. So we do that every year. And then we have events associated with the KO, the Kuhlken Vineyards program. And those are fun and we usually do, this last year I did it as a blind tasting. And it was all they had to guess was like, what's the main variety? What's, and then, I gave all kinds of hints and things. But it was just a chance to go through the techniques of blind tasting. And, it's different it really forces people to taste and not just drink.
Yes.
So,
Yeah. And you have to gate your brain.
exactly. So, and the nice thing about the KO program is that, normally you go to a tasting room, you get the current releases of whatever there is, for the most part. But in the case of a KO event, it's always multiple years, right? And so the 2012 was the first vintage of the KO. That one, we're down to, I don't know, 30 bottles, 20 bottles or something of it. And we just reached a point where it did, you got better, and then it just did this. And so we taste it every year internally just to see where it is. But we don't taste that with consumers anymore because we're just like, there's no more interest. Yeah, it's leveled off. The 13 we still taste, 14 we still taste. As I said, the 15 and 16. There's a real following for the 16, interesting enough. So we still taste that one occasionally. The 15 though is gone. And then 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. So we have a lot of wines to choose from. For a while we were always tasting all of them, and then it's like, no, we can't taste that much wine. So we'll pick some and do that. And so that's really fun. And so we do those events basically twice a year. We do things with the KO. So yeah, that's a handful, of what we do. So
Well, let's talk about a listener's getting excited. They want to, they're, prompting them in and want to come. I got to go visit Pedernales. So what does a tasting typically look like? So when they come to do a tasting, they walk in, they want to do a tasting of your wines. Is it usually like a set flight of wines? Do the customers pick the wines? What does that cost? What does that kind of look like?
So obviously we would love for you to make a reservation in advance.
Could they do that on the website?
You can do it on the website. They can call in. You don't have to, but it's always nice for us to know who's coming, when they're coming. But anyway, so we do a set flight. So we had 2 tasting menus for someone who's never been here before. One is the estate tasting menu, and that's available 7 days a week. We're only closed 4 days a year, so basically continuously available. It does change over time, though. So if you come 6 months later, it's not going to be the same menu. And then on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, we have a reserve tasting.
Okay.
And that's all, generally speaking, all reds. And sometimes we'll involve some older vintages. And so the estate tasting this time of year is usually 2 whites and then 3 reds. And then we usually have something we're bonus pouring. And as I said, they're almost all red. So the estate tasting is $25 and the $8, and the reserve menu is $40.
Okay.
So, and if you come 2 people, they can, one can do one tasting and one can do the other one. So if you want to share, across those two menus. So those are the 2 we have. We have a separate menu for wine club members that is things that have been released to them, but not to the general public. So on the weekends, we're pouring 3 different menus, but if you're just walking off the street, you're not going to have the wine club menu.
Well, you mentioned you're open all but 4 days a year. What are your typical operating hours?
Well, during the week, we're open 10 to 5. And then on Friday and Saturday, we stay open until 6.
Okay.
So, and Sunday, we do not open until noon.
Yeah.
So,
A little delay there.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Do those hours change seasonally, or they're pretty much locked in?
yeah, it's pretty much locked in. So,
And then, of course, listeners can look that up on the website if you need to remind yourself what those hours are. What about the winery itself? Are you family friendly, pet friendly? Could kids come, or is it adults only? Animals, pets, things like that?
well, we're very we're very dog friendly or pet friendly. We do not allow dogs into the tasting room, and it's really accommodating. We used to, but we found it's really too. It's against the health code. You're not supposed to, right? But we were out in Stonewall, so no one's out here very often. So, but the other problem we found was if multiple people had their dogs inside, the dog interaction was the problem. It wasn't this dog's nice, that dog's nice, those two dogs together are not
Get together. Yeah.
so anyway, obviously the dogs are very welcome out on our deck, and we have and can run around to some degree. And it was, we always have water bowl out there. So, same with kids. No,
They don't want to drink out of the water bowl, though.
exactly. So no, I mean, we're very family friendly. I mean, both David and I have families of our own, though, mostly grown up at this point. And so the kids can come in the tasting room. We do ask if you make a reservation that you count your kids, even if they're not doing a tasting. And of course, again, because we're off of 290, there's enormous lawn there for people to just, people will bring frisbees and,
Beautiful outdoor space.
yeah, big outdoor space. So a lot of people, families with very young kids, babies will just put out a,
Yellow too.
Blanket or
or something. Right. Yeah. And just, have the baby there, and then they, So yeah, no, we're completely family friendly. So,
Good. What about food options? Do you provide kind of food options, or can people bring their own ice chests with things?
people can bring their own food. We do not police that. They can't bring their own alcohol.
Sure.
It's TABC. And then we have charcuterie plates.
Okay.
For purchase. You can order them in advance. Yeah. And then crackers and little things. But if you want a full meal, you're gonna want to bring it with you.
Do you have any maximum group sizes for people? I know you want to have a reservation ahead of time for sure, but if somebody have a group of 12 or 15 or something like that, do you try to cap any of that?
We try to accommodate every group.
Okay.
Sometimes it's just necessary to do the tasting outside.
Sure.
Because it'll just fill up the tasting room too much. But no, we try to work with every group to try, because we've had groups of 30 and 40. You cannot show up with a group of 30 and 40 and expect it.
Set that reservation out of time.
So, but no, I mean, I think it's 6. I think you can make a reservation to up to 6 people. And after that, you're going to have to call anyway, because the system won't let you make a reservation.
Notice.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's how we know the larger groups are coming, is because they have to call us and say, hey, you want to come with a larger group?
And since you're open every day, it's easy to call and get a hold of somebody. So no problem. No excuse to do. What are some of your busier and slower seasons? What's the best time to come visit?
Well, I mean, if you can come midweek, that's true all year round, right? It's always best to come midweek because there's fewer people here. The busiest months are obviously the nicest months in terms of the weather, which is October and April. April, you have the additional benefit of the wildflowers, which brings people out. So, the slowest months, so if you're looking for a slow month, are January.
Okay.
January, June, and September. For different reasons. Obviously, January, there's people who have decided not to drink for whatever reason. But it's an excellent time to go visit a winery, as it turns out. And then June, a lot of people go on vacation. We really see that. And it's getting hot. And then September, it's just the transition back to school, sort of, you would know very well. So, and just that change in schedule for a lot of people means that it slows down. And it's in Central Texas, it's still hot in September. So you have none of the advantages yet. As I always say, it's almost bizarre. You're just grinding through September. It's like, no one's here. October 1st. Wow, where'd you guys come from?
Doors open, the crowds are coming in.
So, but anyway, obviously it's extremely, my favorite month, actually, interesting enough.
Yeah.
Partially because I just think it's, people don't, particularly if you're not from Central Texas, you're not aware of this. We have absolutely gorgeous days in February. It's like 77 degrees, a little breeze, and there's no bugs. And that's prime territory. So yeah, I really like being out here in February. And it's usually it's green, but it's not, obviously, sure. We have basically all live oaks on our property, so you're not looking at all these dead trees. They're always have leaves anyway. So,
we've talked about, my wife and I talked about, you've got 2 different types of wine tasters. You've got the people that come out that are extroverts versus the people who come out that are introverts. And the extroverts want to come out on those busy months where it's full of people and there's an energy and a crowd going on. Then you have the introvert wine tasters who are like, what's that slow month? Because that's when I want to go and I'm the only one there, or just a couple of people. So it appeals to different people at different times.
Yeah,
sure.
No, definitely. Some, and you have a busy Saturday and there's sort of a buzz in the room, but it can also, get a little overwhelming. So yeah, but that's also the advantage of the deck, is because really it never feels like there's just too many voices on the deck.
There's
Because
lots of places to go.
Lots of
You can
places.
spread out to if you need.
yeah, exactly. So, in fact, I've seen people, but as I said, we have this large lawn, but there's little clusters of trees, right? And I've seen people grab a chair and drag it all the way down to the fence line, just trying to reach a spot where, they can't,
Secluded.
completely secluded, but under a tree.
Yes. Then shade.
Yes, exactly.
Well, we've mentioned your wine club a few times. Tell me a little bit about your wine club. What does that look like and how do people join?
Well, you can join online. You can join by calling. It's easy. It's easy to join. There's, obviously, there's no sign up fee or anything. Basically, we have 3 levels, if you will. A 3-bottle level. I can't remember my own names. One is Panorama's the 12 one. That's the one I remember. Vista, and what is the first one? It's something to do with a view as well. Right. In any case, so fundamentally there's 3-bottle, 6-bottle, and 12-bottle. The 12-bottle is fully customizable, and starting, I think now, but basically in the new year, the 6-bottle is becoming fully customizable. So,
So they can pick their wines.
they can pick their wines. We will set a package,
Sure.
and then you can go in and change it, or just say, fine, I'll take that.
There's choice.
Yeah. So, and we have both a winemaker's choice, which will always include some white wine or rosé, and then we have reds only, because we make disproportionately much more red wine than we make white wine, and so at every level you can choose those. But obviously, if you're a Panorama member or now a Vista member at 6 bottles, and you only want Viognier Reserve, you can get 6 or 12 Viognier Reserve, right? You get no red wine whatsoever. So. And then the discounts are slightly different. So at the Panorama level, you get 25% off your package, and at the other levels, you get 20. Good on. Anyway, so yeah.
Well, if a listener is getting excited, come visit. I have viewers and listeners from all over, not only the state, but all over the country. So sometimes it's a little long drive, maybe, for some people to get here. Is there any way to experience your wines outside of coming here? Distribution, selling online, things like that.
Yeah, we do sell online. We just currently, I think we send to 35 states. People, I think consumers are always confused, like, well, why don't you send to X? Well, actually, it's illegal.
Yeah, right.
Like
Not your control.
Yeah, it's illegal to ship to Utah, for instance. And then other states actually make it prohibitively expensive or time-consuming. And so that ends up. But every state who wants their consumers to be able to experience Texas wine, we do ship to. So you can order online. We also are in distribution. So, but it is a limited set of wines that are in distribution. So as
Sampling.
yeah, it's just a sampling. So we have, as I said, the Viognier and Tempranillo, which is you see, at this point, there's most HEBs I go into, I see them. We also make wines for HEB that are private label to HEB. It was about 40% of the wines in HEB are actually made for HEB.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but they don't want to compete on price.
Sure.
Right. So anyway, so we make, it's called 6 Generations, and there's a red blend and a white blend, and they're named for the fact that we are a 6th generation Texas family. Okay. Reason for the name, and it's explained on there. And so those are available. Those are the wines you're going to see around, but it gives you a good introduction to Pedernales if you've never had our wine before.
Yeah. So if you're getting excited to come and you haven't had a chance to get here yet, you can still go out and get some of those at your local HEB or order online, so you can get a sampling ahead of time before you come and taste the good thing here as well. So you talked a little bit about the location here and all the expansions you've done and expansions on the vineyard, things like that. What about future growth? Do you have plans for future growth or for new renovations or things that you're wanting to do or planning to do?
The fact is, having a facility this size, you're constantly doing new things.
Yeah.
We don't have any, some of the low-hanging fruit we've done over the last 4 years. We redid the road, the windy road. We put in the EV, there's charging stations. So if you have an electrical vehicle, yeah. So a lot of our initiatives actually that we are engaged with are around sustainability. It was only 3 years ago we put in the 55,000 gallon rainwater collection tank to this building. It was amazing. Just how much roof, you don't realize how much water is coming off that roof. We installed it during a drought. It rained once and it was 66% full. Yeah, no, it's just a lot of water that we can capture. So what we're working on right now is we're working with some other wineries to to develop a certification for Texas wineries so they can get certified sustainable.
Okay.
Yeah, we're doing it on the basis of the SIP certification that's out of California. The fact is there are some things that they're in that certification that you could never do in Texas, right? Because every growing region is different, unique, and so there's things that can be really easy in one place, but absolutely impossible to do somewhere else. Like New York State has just recently put together their sustainable, and again, obviously, their humidity is their problem, right? And that's not our problem. So, in fact, one of the sticking points is the Pierce's disease.
Okay.
Because the common treatments they want to say are completely prohibited. It's like, well, again, all our vines will die.
Is that?
So
You can't just rubber stamp. You have to customize it for your
absolutely
location.
customizable. So anyway, that's what we're working on, the most actively. I don't think in terms of physical plant we have any intention. We're not going to make the winery any bigger.
Yeah.
It's actually we could make more wine than we do in this space, so we don't need to expand it. Anyway, and the tasting room, as I said, we remodeled only 4 years ago, so and we just redid the deck. So again, someone who hasn't been here for 2 years, that's a new deck. And it used to have a railing around it, and we thought that was a really nice deal, because people could put their glasses on the railing. But then we realized that actually blocks the view, which is really one of the things that, as I said, 40% of the people who bother to write a review say, "Wow, what a view!"
And that's why there's a stem on the glass. You can hold your glass. Enjoy the view.
And we do have tables too.
I've also seen outside you have some T-shirts and things that say "Seriously Texas Wine." Tell me about that.
That is, as I said, my brother's better at naming things. We were just, when we first started, we had this tagline, distinctively hill country.
Okay.
And, after about 2 years, we're like, no, we don't need it. It didn't really work. It didn't associate with wine, right? That's part of the problem. So it can be used by, a clothing manufacturer. So anyway, so it's seriously.Texas wine. It was, it really is kind of ironic, right? Because, you so often, particularly in the early days, you're like, seriously, are you making wine in Texas?
Yeah.
It's very often what people would say. And then we're like, no, seriously, we're making Texas wine. So that really sort of captured that experience. I mean, I even had someone ask, like, well, if you wanted to make wine, why didn't you go to California? I was like, because I'm a Texan.
Right. Because the wine here is very different from California wine.
So anyway, for all those, that is the reason for the Seriously Texas wine. And we do have it, I can give you a sticker. So you have it.
Bottle.
So, and then it's one of the things about Texas wine. We're still in a place where whenever you're talking about your brand, you're talking about Texas wine in general, because there's a lot of people in Texas drinking Cali Cab still and don't even know there's wine in Texas. So you are always advocating for no, try. I mean, and we are all aware of those people who tried it 15 years ago and got a bad bottle of it. And then it just stigmatizes the whole category. And, I understand that. I mean, certainly 20 years ago, to go and pick up Texas wine off the shelf was a pretty dicey affair.
Sure.
So now you have so many good options. You're going to be fine.
Hashtag ask for Texas wine.
Yes, exactly.
All right. Okay. So, as always, there are a lot of great places in Texas to come experience that Seriously Texas wine. What, in your opinion, really sets Pedernales Cellars apart? That really makes people say, man, I've got to move that up on my list and get out there and check it out?
Well, I mean, it's just, we were wine growers first, right? And so we really very much look at the industry, and our approach to winemaking is like, how can we make this into a sustainable industry where we are making quality wine every single year? And it did mean making choices. Like when we picked Tempranillo, most people didn't, we would go to festivals and people would say, oh, I'll have your cab. It's like, it's a Tempranillo. A what? People didn't even know. Yeah, exactly. And, people would walk in the tasting room and ask, I've heard about your Tempranillo, right? So, in that sense, for us, it's very, very important that we are consistently producing the best wine possible in Texas.
Okay.
And then you also get the chance to enjoy it looking at the fabulous view. So, for the customer point of view, we have a very our staff has been with us. Most of us have been with us for a very long time because we have a bonus program that incentivizes them to stay, basically, as opposed to moving around. And so you also have that, if you will, longer term relationship that the people who work for us know the wine extremely well.
Yeah.
And obviously, we like them too. So, and so, yeah, the service is excellent as well. So.
Now you get to taste those great wines and experience that attentive service that Dr. Kuhlken mentioned there in the interview when you go to visit. And you got to make sure and try not only that Tempranillo that she talked of, but many of those great varietals that they have provided for you in the tasting room. Now, make sure to go and check out their website before you visit. It's www.pedernalescellars.com. And in case you're some of those LBJ people that don't know exactly how to pronounce Pedernales, it's Pedernales, and you see the spelling of it down there. So make sure you go to the right website when you go to check out their information, because on their website, you're going to find a lot of information about those great wines that they have, what to expect when you go to visit them. You'll find information about their wine club and those wine clubs that she talked about and how to actually join them. You can join them right there on the website. You'll find information about their events, more information about their history, and read about their vineyard there while you're there. And then possibly buy some of those wines if you want to have some of them shipped to you as well. Now, don't forget, when you go see them, make sure you tell them you heard about them on this podcast, Texas Under Vine. Now, once I had wrapped up the interview, Dr. Kuhlken invited me up to the tasting room. They were actually having a wine club tasting event that day, and she invited me to be a part of it. It was a really cool event. They had a food truck out front serving these delicious and really amazing pizzas. I got to try a couple of those, and then I went inside, and they were doing a vertical tasting of their Texas Family Reserve wine. Now, if you remember from the interview, this was the very first wine that they made back in 2005 there at Pedernales Cellars, and it's usually a blend of several of the different grapes that they have in their vineyard. It changes year to year based on the varietals or based on the percentages of those particular varietals that make up that blend, but they were doing a cool vertical tasting. That means we had multiple years that we could try of different vintages of that particular wine. Now, although I wasn't lucky enough, they didn't have any of that very first vintage to be able to try, they did have several years available for me to go through and see not only how this wine has evolved, how it changes based on the different percentages of varietals or even the varietals that are in the wine, as well as the effect that aging can have on this particular wine. And when all was said and done, I set my sights and had to buy a bottle of that Texas Family Reserve. Now, this is their 2015 vintage, so it is almost 10 years old right now. So unfortunately, they don't sell this or even taste it in the tasting room when you go to visit, but you can still taste that Texas Family Reserve, and you'll get to taste their current vintage when you go. And I really encourage you to do that. It's a great wine, and it really gives you that history of the place to know that this is kind of where they all got started. So make sure you try that Texas Family Reserve when you go to see them. All right, well, it's time for me. I'm going to saddle up and move on down the road. I've got a lot of other great wine destinations I need to go check out and bring that information to you in future episodes. But before I go, I would like to solicit a favor from you. Would you be willing to sponsor the podcast through my Patreon? So I do have a Patreon site. If you go to my website, it's www.texasundervine.com, and go up to the top when you get there. There's a little button, a little area that says Become a Patron. And you can actually click on that to go to my Patreon site. Now, for just a few dollars a month, you can help me bring all of this great information to you, the listener or the watcher, as well as many other people who are finding out about our great state and the great wine that we make here. For just a few dollars a month, you'll get access to things like behind the scenes photos, behind the scenes videos. I do a video walkthrough at each location at one of the levels based on what level you choose to subscribe at. You can even find out before everyone else where I'm going to next. I'll make some video announcements about the locations I have coming there. And so Your support really helps me get this show out to you, and it's also going to give you some added benefits. So check that out. And if you don't want to do a monthly subscription, you can always just use the make a donation. Give me a one-time donation. It really helps to cover all of my costs that I have for this podcast that isn't free, unfortunately. But it's such a labor of love and such a fun thing to do. And I hope you're enjoying the information I'm providing for you. Also, if you're watching the episode on YouTube, make sure to like, follow, and subscribe, and go down and leave me a comment. Tell me what's your favorite thing about Pedernales Cellars, or if you haven't been yet, what are you most looking forward to when you go to see them? And with that, my time is up. So don't forget, subscribe to my socials to be notified anytime a new episode is released. And until then, happy trails and bottoms up, y'all. Thanks for listening to Texas Under Vine. We strive to provide you with the best information about wine businesses all over Texas. Be sure to check out our website at texasundervine.com and follow us on our socials at Texas Under Vine to stay up on all the upcoming episodes. Please email us with any suggestions or feedback. Also, contact us if you're interested in donating, sponsoring, or advertising on the podcast, just to help us cover our expenses and bring even more great info to you in future episodes. Above all, travel safely, and most especially, drink responsibly. Howdy, Vine Trippers. Before we go, I wanted to direct you to my website, www.texasundervine, because there you're going to find a whole host of things. Besides access to the audio versions and the video versions of the podcast, you can also get those on any podcast provider, and then the video on YouTube. But there you're going to find a couple of things. Did you know that I actually sold some Texas Under Vine merchandise? I only have a handful of items available, about 5 different things, but they are up on my store. So if you go to the website, texasundervine.com, and go to the top, you're going to see a link for the merchandise store, and there you can get your own Texas Under Vine swag to proudly show all of your friends that you support the Texas wine industry, and you can get them started on and hooked on the podcast as well, so they can go visit even more of these great wine destinations. But in addition to the store, I also have a Patreon for my subscribers, people that support this show. I do this all out of a work of love from my heart. I do not make any money on this podcast. I'm actually in the red because I support it all out of my own pocket as a teacher. And it's mainly because I love wine and I love the Texas wine industry. So if you're willing to help me do that and you'd like to see more of these great episodes, hear more from these amazing winemakers, learn more about some fun destinations for you to go and visit on your own, I would appreciate if you would be willing to subscribe to my Patreon. So at the top of my website page, again, you'll find a Become a Patron link. And there you can get all the information about becoming a subscriber to the podcast here as a Patreon subscriber. It only costs a few dollars a month if you're willing to commit that. And there are various levels that you can commit to that each give you behind the scenes benefits that you don't get. And I do have some new things in the pipeline coming down soon. So you want to get on that sooner than later. But right now you can get things like behind the scenes photos at different wineries. You can get things like at one level, you'll get a video walkthrough of the winery. So for every episode, I will post a video walkthrough of me taking you through the winery itself so you can see what it's like before you go. And then at one level, you can even find out before everyone else where I'm headed the next week on the show as it comes out. So you'll know before everyone else. You get a sneak peek. So there's just different levels of benefits, and they all cost a different amount. And as you subscribe, you become the heart of this podcast. You really are what helps me succeed. You are my community and my people. And thank you so much for those that do subscribe. So if you're interested in joining Patreon, check the Become a Patron link at the top of the website. So again, the website is www.texasundervine.com. You can also go to all of my socials. I'm at Texas Under Vine on almost all the social accounts. And check it out and consider sponsoring the podcast and maybe even buying some of that really cool swag on the merchandise store. Happy trails and bottoms up, Vine Trippers.